He was a rising star in the NFL, a record-breaking tight end with speed, power, and charisma. Drafted by one of the greatest football dynasties in the world, Aaron Hernandez had everything a young athlete could dream of: fame, fortune, and a future paved in gold. But behind the game-day smile was a man haunted by demons no one could see, or chose not to. In just a few short years, Hernandez's life spiraled from touchdowns to trials, from end zones to the edge of a jail cell. His stunning arrest for murder rocked the sports world, but it was only the beginning of a much darker story, one involving gang ties, paranoia, violence, and a tragic end that left more questions than answers. This is not just the story of a fallen athlete. This is the story of one of the most shocking downfalls in NFL history. A tale of promise, pain, and the chilling unraveling of a man behind the mask. Aaron Joseph Hernandez was born on November 6, 1989, in Bristol, Connecticut, a small town where family, football, and community pride ran deep. He grew up in a working-class household as the younger of two sons. To the outside world, the Hernandez family looked stable, even ideal. His father, Dennis Hernandez, was a respected figure in the community, a former athlete himself, and a strict, discipline-heavy role model who pushed Aaron to excel both in the classroom and on the field. But inside the home, life was far more complicated. Friends and family would later speak of an environment marked by control, aggression, and physical abuse. Dennis ruled the house with an iron fist, and although his expectations forged Aaron into a promising athlete, they may have also planted seeds of anger and internal conflict. When Aaron was just 16, tragedy struck. His father died unexpectedly due to complications from a routine hernia surgery. The loss devastated the young athlete, sending his life into emotional chaos. He grew more rebellious, began hanging with the wrong crowd, and reportedly started experimenting with drugs. According to later reports and testimonies, Aaron may also have experienced childhood sexual abuse. Trauma he kept hidden, but that weighed heavily on his psyche. As his personal life grew more unstable, football became his escape. He channeled his pain into performance, dominating the high school gridiron and becoming one of the most heavily recruited tight ends in the country. But even then, signs of volatility were emerging. A simmering rage behind his quiet demeanor. An intensity that could either fuel greatness or destruction. After a standout high school career, Aaron Hernandez committed to the University of Florida, a powerhouse football program under legendary coach Urban Meyer. Arriving in Gainesville at just 17 years old, he quickly made a name for himself as a dynamic, agile tight end with elite hands and route-running skills far beyond his years. He was young, gifted, and fearless, a perfect fit for a team aiming for national titles. Hernandez was part of a star-studded Gators squad that included future NFL talents like Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin, and the Pouncey Twins. In 2008, the team won the BCS National Championship, and Aaron played a significant role, proving himself as a rising collegiate star. He would go on to win the John Mackey Award in 2009, recognizing him as the nation's top tight end. On the field, he was nearly unstoppable. But off the field, troubling signs persisted. Rumors of fights, failed drug tests, and frequent altercations began to swirl. He reportedly tested positive for marijuana multiple times, yet disciplinary action remained limited, partly due to his value to the team and the protective shield that often surrounds elite college athletes. Coach Urban Meyer later admitted that Hernandez required constant supervision, and it became increasingly difficult to manage his behavior. Despite this, he continued to produce results on the field, and his NFL potential only grew. Still, there were whispers of darker things beneath the surface. Rumors of aggression, erratic behavior, and a quick temper. Some teammates described him as charismatic but deeply unpredictable, a young man who could turn from friendly to hostile in a moment. His reputation for partying, violence, and questionable associations with gang-affiliated individuals began to follow him. It was clear that Aaron Hernandez was carrying unresolved pain and anger, and the structure of a college program, no matter how elite, was beginning to crack under the weight of it. By the time he declared for the NFL draft after his junior year, scouts were impressed by his physical gifts, but concerned by his character. His draft stock fell sharply, not because of his talent, but because of the growing belief that Aaron Hernandez was a risk that, as it would turn out, no one truly understood. In 2010, despite being one of the most talented tight ends in the draft, Aaron Hernandez was selected by the New England Patriots in the 4th round, a major drop for a player with first-round athleticism. The reason? Character concerns, drug use, rumored off-field issues, and associations with dangerous people made most teams wary. But the Patriots, led by coach Bill Belichick, took a calculated chance. Hernandez arrived in Foxborough with something to prove. Almost immediately, he began to exceed expectations. Alongside fellow tight end Rob Gronkowski, a fellow 2010 draftee, Hernandez helped redefine the position. The duo became a nightmare for defenses, with Hernandez's versatility and speed allowing him to line up as a receiver, in the backfield, or even take handoffs. In just his second season, Hernandez racked up 910 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. He helped lead the Patriots to Super Bowl 46, becoming a central piece of one of the league's most dynamic offenses with Tom Brady at the helm. Off the field, his public image began to shift. He donated to charity, spoke about changing his life, and appeared to be turning a corner. In 2012, the Patriots rewarded his performance with a 5-year, $40 million contract extension, a rare and lucrative deal for such a young player. Just 22 years old, Aaron Hernandez was one of the highest-paid tight ends in NFL history. The media praised the team's gamble. It looked like Hernandez had left his troubled past behind, but that image was an illusion. Behind closed doors, Hernandez remained volatile. He surrounded himself with a circle of friends who had little connection to the NFL or professionalism, many with criminal records or gang ties. He was known to carry firearms, and his paranoia began to grow. He reportedly installed advanced surveillance systems in his home, began distrusting those around him, and would even stay in hotel rooms to avoid being followed. Teammates noticed he kept to himself, often moody or intense. Despite the fame and success, Aaron Hernandez seemed trapped between two lives: the professional athlete adored by millions and the street-influenced young man still battling demons from his past. No one at the time could imagine how quickly those two worlds would collide, or how deadly the consequences would be. Beneath the surface of Aaron Hernandez's NFL stardom was a man leading a dangerous double life, one filled with secrets, paranoia, and violence. While he wore a Patriots jersey on Sundays and smiled at press conferences, away from the field, Hernandez surrounded himself with individuals tied to gang culture, drugs, and crime. Despite earning millions and living in a luxurious mansion in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, he continued to associate with friends from his old neighborhood, some of whom had violent criminal histories. He began to show signs of increasing instability. Hernandez frequently carried firearms, even when visiting the Patriots' facilities. He grew suspicious of those closest to him, reportedly distrusting teammates, friends, and even family. He had his home outfitted with an elaborate security system, including dozens of surveillance cameras, not just for protection, but seemingly to monitor everyone around him. One former associate recalled that Hernandez would go days without sleep, obsessing over the idea that he was being watched or followed. In many ways, he was living in a self-created prison long before he would ever see the inside of a real one. The first public sign that Hernandez might be capable of true violence came with a 2011 double homicide in Boston. 2 men were shot and killed after an alleged dispute in a nightclub. Surveillance footage placed Hernandez at the scene earlier that night, but he was never charged at the time. Only years later, during his murder trial for a separate case, would his alleged involvement in that shooting come to light. Behind closed doors, people close to Hernandez were growing concerned. Reports suggest that even the Patriots organization knew he was troubled. Bill Belichick reportedly warned him to cut ties with dangerous acquaintances, and even advised him to move to a safer area. But Hernandez refused. The allure of his old life, the street respect, the bravado, the recklessness, was too strong. Despite his growing fame, Aaron couldn't let go of the past. He seemed to be slipping deeper into a violent mindset, one where he believed loyalty was everything, betrayal meant death, and violence was a justifiable solution. This wasn't just a man with a temper. This was a man living a life of contradictions, a pro athlete and a self-styled enforcer, a millionaire living like a man with nothing to lose. And in the summer of 2013, those contradictions would explode into tragedy. On the morning of June 17, 2013, a jogger in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, made a horrifying discovery: the body of a young man lying in a remote industrial park, riddled with bullets. He was later identified as 27-year-old Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player and the boyfriend of Shania Jenkins, the sister of Aaron Hernandez's fiancée, Shayana. The murder sent shockwaves through the local community. As police began to piece together what happened, all evidence started to point in an unexpected and unthinkable direction: Aaron Hernandez. The NFL star had ties to the victim and lived just a mile from where the body was found. What initially seemed implausible, that a multi-millionaire pro athlete could be involved in a brutal execution, quickly became chillingly plausible. Surveillance footage from Hernandez's home showed him leaving in a rented car with 2 friends, Carlos Ortiz and Ernest Wallace, around 1 a.m. on the night of the murder. Hours later, that same vehicle was captured, returning to the house, but this time without Odin. Further investigation revealed that the same car had been rented in Hernandez's name. A shell casing found in the vehicle matched casings at the crime scene. Perhaps most damning were the recordings from Hernandez's own surveillance system. Inside his home, he was seen holding a firearm just hours after the murder. He then appeared to destroy the surveillance hard drive shortly after investigators began closing in, a failed attempt to erase digital footprints. Cell tower records, text messages, and witness testimonies created a clear timeline, placing Hernandez with Odin Lloyd shortly before the murder. Even more disturbing was the alleged motive. Hernandez believed Lloyd had disrespected him by talking to people at a nightclub he didn't trust. That minor slight, in the eyes of a man consumed by paranoia and a twisted code of loyalty, was reason enough to kill. Just 9 days after the murder, on June 26, 2013, Aaron Hernandez was arrested at his home. He was led away in handcuffs, shirtless and without resistance, as cameras rolled live on national television. Within hours, the New England Patriots released him from the team. A once celebrated athlete had gone from star to suspect in the blink of an eye. The case marked one of the most stunning and public downfalls in sports history. But for Odin Lloyd's family, it was not about headlines or the NFL. It was about the loss of a kind, hard-working son, brother, and friend. A man whose life ended violently and senselessly, caught in the orbit of someone who had it all and threw it all away. The trial of Aaron Hernandez for the murder of Odin Lloyd began in January 2015 and quickly became one of the most widely watched courtroom dramas in recent memory. A man once celebrated for his athleticism was now the focus of a chilling criminal case, not just for what he had done, but for how methodically it was uncovered. Prosecutors laid out a damning case. They painted Hernandez as a cold, calculating killer who executed Lloyd over perceived betrayal. The evidence was largely circumstantial, but powerful in its totality. Tire tracks, security footage, cell phone pings, shell casings, texts, and witness accounts. There was no murder weapon found, yet the case's strength rested in how all the puzzle pieces fit. The prosecution showed that Hernandez attempted to cover his tracks, destroying surveillance footage, hiring a cleaning crew, and distancing himself from key individuals. Even Hernandez's fiancée, Cheyenne Jenkins, became embroiled in the trial, charged with perjury after admitting she removed a box from their home, possibly containing the murder weapon. The defense team tried to raise doubts, arguing that Hernandez was targeted because of his fame and that he had no clear motive to kill someone so close to his family. But the jury was not convinced. After 7 weeks of testimony and 7 days of deliberation, they returned a verdict on April 15, 2015. Guilty of first-degree murder. Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, marking a definitive end to his football career and freedom. As the verdict was read, Hernandez showed no emotion. But outside the courtroom, emotions ran high. Odin Lloyd's family wept, expressing relief and heartbreak. For them, justice was served. But no verdict could bring Odin back. However, the story didn't end there. In 2017, Hernandez stood trial again, this time for a 2012 double homicide in Boston, where 2 men were gunned down after a minor club dispute. Hernandez was acquitted, a surprising outcome given the weight of evidence presented. Still, he remained behind bars for Lloyd's murder, serving life at Souza Baranowski Correctional Center. These trials exposed more than just a crime. They revealed the deep fractures in Hernandez's psyche, the blurred lines between athlete and outlaw, and the tragic cost of unchecked anger, fame, and unresolved trauma. The courtroom may have delivered legal justice, but for many, the bigger questions were just beginning. On April 19, 2017, just 5 days after being acquitted in the 2012 double homicide trial, Aaron Hernandez was found dead in his prison cell. He had hanged himself using a bedsheet, blocking the door with cardboard and soaping the floor to make it slippery in case anyone tried to enter. He was 27 years old. The news stunned the world. Why would a man who had just won a major legal battle, who seemed to have some hope left, choose to end his life? As investigators searched the cell, they found haunting clues. Written on the walls in blood were Bible verses and symbols. Next to his bed was an open Bible turned to John 3:16. There were also notes, one addressed to his fiancée, one to his daughter, and one to a prison lover, suggesting a complex and deeply conflicted emotional world. Theories swirled. Was it guilt? Despair? A calculated move to help his family financially through a legal loophole? Or was there something deeper at play? Just a few months later, the world got a shocking answer. Hernandez's brain had been donated to researchers at Boston University, home to the leading center for studying chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain disease linked to repeated head trauma, common among football players. The results were staggering. Hernandez was found to have stage 3 CTE, one of the most severe cases ever seen in someone so young. The condition causes symptoms such as mood swings, impaired judgment, impulse control issues, and depression. His brain showed significant damage to the frontal lobe, the area responsible for decision-making and behavior regulation. The discovery sparked a nationwide debate. How much did football and repeated concussions contribute to Hernandez's behavior? Could the NFL have done more? Was Hernandez a villain, or also a victim of trauma, negligence, and a system that prioritized performance over mental health? For his family, the diagnosis was both a revelation and a tragedy. His fiancée and mother of his child filed lawsuits against the NFL and the Patriots, claiming they failed to protect him and properly educate players about the risks of head injuries. Hernandez's death and the CTE findings that followed shifted his legacy from that of a murderer alone to a symbol of a deeper, darker crisis within the sport he once dominated. A man whose mind, quite literally, may have been broken long before his crimes ever took place. In the wake of Aaron Hernandez's death and the stunning revelation of his severe CTE, the world was left grappling with the complexity of his story. A tragedy that went far beyond headlines and highlight reels. The immediate aftermath was filled with pain, confusion, and controversy. For the Lloyd family, his death brought no peace, just more questions and an enduring sense of loss. Odin was gone, and now so was the man who took his life. The NFL, already under increasing scrutiny for its handling of head injuries, found itself at the center of renewed outrage. How could a young man who had played football nearly his entire life reach such a severe stage of brain degeneration without proper intervention or support? The Patriots distanced themselves quickly. Hernandez's name was scrubbed from team history, merchandise pulled from shelves, and his records largely erased. Yet, the story would not fade. In 2020, Netflix released the documentary Killer Inside the Mind of Aaron Hernandez, which reignited global interest and conversation. Viewers were confronted with the full scope of Hernandez's troubled life, his abusive childhood, rumored sexual identity struggles, untreated mental illness, and the violent culture surrounding elite sports. Public opinion began to fracture. Some saw Hernandez purely as a murderer, someone who made choices no amount of trauma could excuse. Others began to see him as a deeply broken figure, a victim of compounding forces, family dysfunction, systemic failures, and a sport that glorified violence while ignoring its long-term costs. The legal aftermath continued as well. Shayana Jenkins filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of their daughter against the NFL and the Patriots, arguing that they failed to protect Hernandez from the dangers of football-related head trauma. Though legal immunity laws complicated matters, the case fueled the broader movement for concussion, safety, and mental health awareness in sports. Hernandez's story became a cautionary tale, not just of a fallen star, but of how power, trauma, and neglect can collide to devastating effect. Coaches, players, and organizations were forced to reflect. What signs were missed? What behaviors were excused? What systems allowed someone like Aaron Hernandez to spiral so far out of control, unchecked? His legacy is a contradiction. A once brilliant athlete whose life was marred by unimaginable choices and mental decline. It's a story with no heroes, only victims. But it also opened a door for much-needed conversations about how we treat young men in sports, how we understand mental illness, and how much responsibility institutions bear for the people they profit from. Aaron Hernandez's story is one of the most tragic and unsettling in modern sports history. It's a narrative layered in complexity, a gifted athlete whose life spiraled from glory to infamy, a man caught between fame and violence, between outward success and inner turmoil. What began as a promising football career ended in bloodshed, prison, and a suicide that left more questions than answers. But perhaps, more importantly, his story leaves us with sobering reflections. What do we truly know about the people we idolize? How many signs do we overlook when talent blinds us to character? And what happens when institutions prioritize winning over well-being? Aaron Hernandez wasn't born a killer. He was born into pain, shaped by trauma, loss, and a culture that often equates toughness with silence. The abuse he endured, the mental illness he struggled with, and the severe brain damage he suffered may not excuse his actions, but they demand a deeper understanding of how such a fall could happen. At the same time, we must not forget Odin Lloyd, a son, a brother, a friend, whose life was taken far too soon. His name must remain at the center of this tragedy, because at its core, this story is not just about a football player who lost his way. It's about a young man who lost his life. Aaron Hernandez's downfall serves as a chilling reminder of what can happen when warning signs are ignored, when emotional wounds are left untreated, and when the very game meant to provide opportunity becomes a breeding ground for destruction. His story is over, but its lessons are not. For the NFL, for athletes, for families, for all of us. Fade to black.